All right, let's get started. So tonight we have a great lineup of guest speakers who have been very actively involved in the BSV community here in APAC. So first, we will hear from Leslie, our China manager at BA, to give us an update on what's going on in China, particularly the BSV communities and development over in China. And then we will hear about James Building as well as Stefan February about opportunities and challenges of tokenized securities. And then after that, we will hear from Token Swap. This is pretty exciting because this is the first AMM style DEX that's been built on BSV. So without overdue, let's welcome Liz Lee from China. Hi, Liz.
Hi. Hi, Ella.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, pretty busy, as you know. A lot of things happening lately and in the near future.
Yeah, for sure. I know there's a lot of stuff going on in China and you've been traveling like crazy, jumping from different cities, going to universities. So why don't you give us an update on, like the involvement with the local universities over in China?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. I think some people have maybe followed my Twitter or our some other social media that know that our China team has been busy for the past few months, and we've been in several universities, such as Renmin University of China and University of Science and Technology of China. Both are the top 5 academic institutions in China. And we also went to some other colleges and universities. Sometimes we just maybe participate in the campus activity organized by the blockchain community run by their students. And most of the times we give lectures on the credit courses, and we started to build connections with some professors in different majors in different institutions who's been researching on blockchain for a few years. So it's a good start. And now it's the summer vacation in China. So maybe this month or the next month, we will stop all the campus activities. But from this September, there will be more involvement in the local universities.
What has been the engagement like with the students over there? What's their perception of Bitcoin, and have their experience and understanding of Bitcoin and blockchain in general changed after you guys engaged with them?
Actually, those credit courses we participated, it's usually it's a big range of the blockchain topic. So the course me and other guest speakers we participated is only focused on Bitcoin, especially the BSV theories. But maybe other courses is maybe talk about the digital currency or other cryptocurrencies. It's just the college want to give maybe a general knowledge to the students. Yeah, we also run 2 workshops last month in Hefei University of Technologies, which is a science and engineering university. So Aaron Zhou, our technical outreach specialist, and also Sandy Feng, they both gave some guidance to the students to maybe do some codings and perhaps let them experience their how to interact with the BSV blockchain, which is very good, and the students love that workshops.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely very meaningful. Like you kind of get to educate the students like from early on, and then later on, like after they graduate and start to enter professional lives, they can continue build, and hopefully we can see some amazing projects out of it. And I think especially like in China, like the academia is a very quite influential factor, you know, to the government, to the business world, from my experience as well.
Yeah, one thing that excited me the most is that I also met some students after the lectures, maybe in other occasions. And some students told me their theories about their understandings about blockchain is actually all I told them about the BSV, which makes me feel very satisfied with
That's
that.
great.
Yeah,
Yep.
so I always said to going into the universities and introduce BSV to those students. It's like spreading the seeds to the young generation. Perhaps in a few years, they will be the mainstream power in this industry.
For sure. And I know that you're also super busy preparing for the Chinese DevCon that's coming up. Tell us more about that.
Oh, yes, we haven't announced it yet publicly yet, but it will be in early September, and it will be a physical conference to be held in Shanghai city. That's actually our original plans for last year, right? But because of the pandemic, last year it was the virtual event. Kind of a pity for me, but this year I think it's possible that we can organize this conference on to host some physical attendees. Especially this kind of conference can help us to build our brand more strongly in China. And because during the past 1 year, we have built up some new relationships with some companies, some government officials, some professors. So it's time we can get them all together and networking with them.
I know like the agenda and the specific content are still in the make. Maybe just give us some rough ideas of what are some kind of the tracks or content that people might see in this DevCon.
Okay. First, of course, we are going to invite invite all the Chinese BSV companies, such as Lin's company. They are doing their blockchain as a service, bus platforms, and also such as Sanifeng's company. They are promoting their decentralized identification system, MeetID, and also Gulu's company. Their token solution called Sensible Contract is quite popular here in China. But we are also going to invite some people who's currently outside BSV ecosystem, but their work or their specialties is still focused on blockchain or some other technologies, such as some big data area, or we are going to talk about the pollution issue against the Bitcoin mining. Maybe we are going to host a panel to invite some guests to discuss about this. Some maybe the miners, and some maybe just who works for the environment industry. Also, one of the most important thing is that we haven't announced it yet, but we are going to launch the blockchain engineer certification standards together with CSDN. So BSV blockchain standards will be a subsidiary branch of their big program on CSDN. So I think in the next couple of years, we are going to use that platform to attract more engineers, developers to join BSV ecosystem. It's also a way for us to train and educate new developers.
Yeah, that's great. For those who don't know what CSDN is, it's the largest engineering and developers community in China, probably one of the largest in the world as well, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether the largest in the world, but they actually have over 33 million registered users, and their website has been existing for over 22 years, 21 or 22 years. So it's quite big.
Yeah, that's a very great partners to have. And I'm sure like everyone is dying to meet each other in person and finally able to have a physical event. So if I'm able to go back to China, then I'm definitely interested in joining you guys as well. So I guess recently, you know, there has been a lot of news and around the China digital RMB, and you know, I think you and me, we got asked quite often, like, what's the deal about this digital RMB? You know, what blockchain it's built on, and what's the impact to the rest of, you know, CBDC issued on blockchain, etc. So maybe Liz, you can kind of give us a high overview of the China digital RMB, and maybe you know, bring up some of the misunderstandings, etc., around this topic.
Oh, sure. Just a brief introduction. The RMB digital currency has the ticker. The official ticker is called ECNY. E stands for electronic, I guess. So ECNY is 100% backed by RMB, and it will always be 1-to-1 yuan. So unlike other cryptocurrencies, the price will not fluctuate, will never fluctuate. So if anyone told you that you can invest in ECNY, don't believe that, okay? So the ECNY is actually the electronic cash for China, for the RMB. So it's just you can regard it as a replacement for the cash in circulation. I mean, the cash here means the banknotes, right? Paper notes and the coins. Before that, the banknotes and the coins, they are anonymous, right? And it's hard to trace who has how much those banknotes, those cash, right? But turn it into digital currency that the central bank can easily trace them, but it can still be anonymous and you can spend it. It's a pure electronic cash. So I think based on this concept, it's quite close to the Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is an electronic cash system. But so far, the ECNY hasn't used any blockchain as their fundamental technology. But they used some technology the same as in blockchain, such as maybe when you make the payments, you can also put some data on together with the payment transaction. So it's quite similar to maybe to the Bitcoin transaction, right? Or you can it can also implement some smart contract functions in the future, but I haven't seen anything concrete, any documents that support this concretely yet. So that's all. And so far, many people are confused with ECNY to electronic payment channels. They consider that ECNY will replace like WeChat or Alipay, those popular payment channels existing in China. But actually, I think those payment channels will be the ECNY's wallet. They will be the mobile clients or some clients for the digital currency system. That's all.
Great. Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for the overview. And you know, even the Chinese digital RMB is not on blockchain, but it is still, it borrows some of the design and ideas of the blockchain design, but it's not on a blockchain. And within the BSV sphere, we're also seeing some national level projects that's involved with CBDC. So very much looking forward to see the development over there. Thank you so much, Liz. Next, I am going to bring up James as well as Stefan onto the panel.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Hey guys, how's it going over there?
Hey there.
Hey,
All good?
Ella, how's it going? Going well, thanks.
Awesome. Yeah. So everyone are familiar with James. Maybe Stefan, you can give us an introduction of yourself. What have you, how did you get into the BSV ecosystem, and what are you doing right now? I know you're running a developer resource hub called TwoStack, and tell us a bit more about that as well.
Yeah. So I've basically been a software engineer for about 25 years now. I got into Bitcoin. Well, I became aware of Bitcoin fairly early on, but I pretty much ignored it because as a developer, I like to be able to actually do something useful with things. And early Bitcoin wasn't really that interesting to me at all. I think that it was really only with the advent of Bitcoin SV, but more specifically with the Genesis upgrade, where the programmability of Bitcoin really, it became completely unlocked. And then I became much more interested in it. One of the things that I observed early on, of course, was because there has for the longest time been this focus on trading and wallet infrastructure and exchanges. There really has not been a focus on building out any sort of resources or guides for what a software developer who wants to build applications would be interested in. So that's what I started. So twostack.org is basically that. It's a resource that is focused on guiding developers with tooling and information on how to actually build real world applications. And of course, now the TwoStack YouTube channel as well. Yeah. I should also say that in the last few years, I've basically been my previous two jobs, because I also, until very recently, was full-time employed before I plunged full-time into BSV. My previous two jobs were basically first in a cryptocurrency payments company, which basically had a card payment system for crypto, where you could essentially make your cryptocurrency spendable, similar to the way that RelayX card was recently launched. Similar concept, a previous company that I worked for. And then most recently, I worked for a company that is actually doing security tokens offerings, STOs, as head of engineering. And they specifically are engaged in the capital markets and sort of disrupting the capital market space with an offering. So yeah, so that's sort of a summary of me.
Awesome. And then for those who want to find out more about TwoStack, where can they find this? The YouTube channel and maybe like the Twitter account?
You can basically go to twostack.org, TWOSTACK.org, or if you go to YouTube, just go youtube.com/TwoStack. That's it.
Awesome. Yeah. So a segue to the topic for this section, as Stefan, you mentioned your previous job was actually head of engineering at a pretty large company here in Singapore that's in the tokenized security space. And James, tokenized as being involved in, like helping companies, enterprise clients to deal with tokenizing the assets and securities as part of it. So I think it's great to have you guys as experts in this area and really dive deep into the details on tokenized securities. So first, I think a lot of people are throwing around the idea of security tokens and tokenized securities. So maybe first, just to take a step back, can you guys tell us a bit more about like how to differentiate these two concepts? Maybe we start with you, James.
Yeah, sure. So I think too much has been made of definitions in this space. I don't think that definitions in most laws really need to be repealed or changed, at least in a significant manner, to kind of accommodate distributed ledgers, blockchain. Bitcoin itself, the native token, I agree there's some components there. There's some elements that it's new and regulators need to get their head around it and sort of accommodate it. But when it comes to just securities, these are just financial instruments that represent an investment product. So someone's investing, there's risk that they could lose it or lose no portion of it, and they're expecting some return. It can be troublesome, especially when you consider parties that are transacting either in the secondary market or in the primary market at arm's length, where they don't have a great degree of visibility over the activities of the people that are taking on the investment activities that are looking to earn a return. And there's a great deal of potential for abuse in these types of arrangements. And so naturally over the years, lessons have been learned, regulators have stepped in and kind of stopped, with various different control measures, the things from being taken advantage of, or certain people or certain class of people from being taken advantage. I think that still largely is the case in this new paradigm, this new future that we're building. I don't think those things have changed fundamentally. However, I do think that some of the control measures and the rules can be pushed significantly in directions that are more akin to greater participation, lower cost, more accessibility in general. And I think those risks can be managed with software, different risk-based techniques, different modified, slightly different kind of compliance rules and things like that. So I don't like to make too big of a deal of the definitions. I like to kind of fall in line with the traditional definition and simply push some of the things that can happen with this technology and what software can do that can kind of change and sort of push the limits of what's possible in terms of those controls.
Cool. Stefan, do you have something to add on that?
Yeah, so I think that maybe to add on to what James was saying, right? I think that the moment that we use the word security, we're implicitly talking about a legal framework, right? At least that's my understanding of it. There exists some sort of legal framework and there exists some sort of regulatory framework under which we are trying to talk about these things. So to that extent, my best understanding of it right now is really that a stock certificate really is kind of a token, but the word token is also pretty much overloaded, and maybe in the space that we're operating in, a token has sort of come to mean a very specific thing. So I guess that what people generally would think when they hear words like tokenized securities or tokenizing a security is that they're probably thinking, well, my stock that I normally have with if it's with my broker, can that now become a token? Can I have that as a token? And I guess the answer is yes, perhaps, maybe, at some point. It is possible. Those things already exist as essentially a token within a digital system.
Right.
The challenge, I guess, and why we are talking about it today, for me at least, I guess, is we want to talk about how do we move these tokens or assets that exist right now as one thing inside a central database managed by a regulated body like a stock exchange or an investment bank. How do we move these assets into a distributed network and perhaps give wider or greater access to these assets? And I would say that tokenizing it or wrapping it inside a Bitcoin transaction would, for me, represent the tokenization of it. So if you can take your stock, either the whole stock or splitting it maybe into fractions of value, and then ascribe individual amounts of fractional value to those and wrap it in a Bitcoin transaction where it can now live within the distributed Bitcoin network. That for me would be an example of how you would go about essentially tokenizing it in the way that we understand tokens within the blockchain space. Yeah.
Can you kind of walk us through the entire process of tokenizing securities, like the whole life cycle management of a token that represents securities?
Right. Well, I guess that the easiest part of tokenizing the security will probably be, let me back up a little bit there. To the extent that any sort of security that is managed by a regulated entity, for example, an investment bank or a stock exchange, right? Any security managed by them really it exists only as an accounting entry in a database in their internal systems. Since it really is only an accounting entry, we are really, when we talk about moving, tokenizing that, it really is, on the technical side of things, a matter of striking off an entry in one database and recreating that entry in a different database. So it would be moving it out of the central system that they control that is tied into the blockchain. That would be one way. Another way would essentially be what I guess one could call digital twinning, where you create a mirror image of the token or of the asset, and the mirror image, or this digital twin of the asset, essentially now lives on the blockchain as well. So these are two ways in which one can go about doing it. Of course, once you have two instances of this thing, now your accounting becomes a little bit more complicated. And while this for me is actually the easy part, right? The easy part is the technical bit. The hard part is convincing a regulator that this is a good idea. And there you come up against still the same regulatory infrastructure, which means that if you're actually going to launch a security, or if you're going to issue, let's say, for example, in capital markets, if you're going to issue a bond, then you still need to first find somebody who will issue the bond for you, an investment bank, or somebody with one central platform that will actually issue the bond for you. So you need an issuer, right? Or rather, somebody will help you issue. You as the issuer, say, I'm a company, I want to issue a bond. I go to an investment bank to help me issue the bond. This investment bank will help me issue the bond, and then also try to pull in investors, or match my bond up with potential investors on the other side. So this would be the issuance step. And then once it's issued, then of course there is the initial, or rather before even you issue it, you need to do this long-winded process of having a prospectus out to clients. Clients need to participate in rounds of where the potential investors get informed, etc. And then eventually, let's say you're doing your primary issuance, then the initial issuance of the token or of the investment goes out. Now that your tokenized bond exists after the primary issuance, there normally exists a secondary market for these bonds as well. So now the bonds can start getting traded over the counter, and there again, you might now try to have over-the-counter token trading of these bonds as well. And if there is an exchange where you can trade the tokens, then you can have exchange-traded tokens, which have underlying bonds as the security. So I hope I kind of answered the question in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So James, like in terms of tokenized solution, like which part of this whole process or value chain are you guys involved or providing technical solution to?
Sure. So I kind of want to think about this in first principles a little bit. So, they're really contracts at their heart. And so as Stephen said before, a token really is just a certificate that represents ownership of some rights and duties in a contract that's financial in nature. These tokens can be traded on chain, and this is what we're all interested in, and some of the properties that come with the programmability there. But how did these contracts come into existence, and who governs and controls them, and how do they get distributed, and how do they get managed through the life cycle? So the way that we've approached the problem is that we think back to the contract itself, and securities are typically shares in a company or units in a trust or a bond. And there's some other things as well, some like derivatives and different types of notes and things that can be classified as securities. But very, very principally, if you think about it as like shares in a company or units in a trust or a bond, I think that's a really good place to start. So you have to form this company, or if it's already formed, you have to basically create shares, authorize the issuance of those shares, define what they mean, and explain them to the people that are going to be subscribing to those shares, investors. That's kind of like the disclosure statements, and like you have to let the government or the regulators or the agency that's responsible for managing the registry, essentially, where appropriate, where applicable, depending on the regulators, you have to let them know that it's happened, it's been created, how many. You have to follow the rules as to who can subscribe to them, what due diligence checks need to happen. So all those things can be done with the records, every record involved in that process, effectively barring requirements that specific regulators have can be done on chain. And that's what we think a big value proposition is. I know we'll talk about that a little bit later, but you can, so go back to first principles. Essentially, you're forming a contract that defines the rights and duties of the entity or the agreement that's going to give the rights and duties to these owners. Then you've got to actually sign off on it by authorized representatives of the company, directors, executives that can do that. Then they need to actually have an agreement that is a subscription agreement, investment agreement, that the investors know what they're paying for, how much, what they're getting. Then you can essentially issue the share certificates digitally. So the tokens you're actually transferring to them in return for the payment. And now they've got these tokens in their digital wallets. It's all recorded on chain. If they want to go take it to the secondary markets and they're permitted to, then they can go to broker dealers, ATSs, exchanges, and they can go through their process to list them, which is, there's a whole process involved in that as well. Yeah. And then participants can then go get, purchase those securities in the secondary market. So the key part here is just a lot of those records are very consequential and they can be put on chain, and you can have a lot of software, be leveraged with this new sort of data structure on chain to make it a better user experience, better, faster, cheaper, for sort of a lot of parties involved there. The one thing I will add, which is important to our value proposition, the way we approach the problem, is you still need this control. You still need a transfer agent or broker dealer or some authority that is able to sort of administer these agreements if things go wrong, if there's disputes, if there's mistakes. It's typically done by someone that is licensed by regulator. And you can do that through control, sort of like locking script control, using public key, private key type arrangements and signatures, similar to how a Bitcoin is sent. And you can do that so that they can actually exercise their rights using enforcement orders, those types of things on chain. So you kind of allow for them to do what they need to do on chain. That's essentially the way we think about it.
So you already touched upon, a lot of the value proposition of, tokenizing securities on chain. But from your experience, like just talking to companies and potential clients, what has been some of the major drivers to get interest from them? Like what are they mostly interested about in terms of tokenizing securities?
Sure. So, I mean, they're all interested in less boring work, freeing their time up to do other things, not getting stuck in all the paperwork, not doing repetitive processes that are error prone. So, for example, if you form an agreement and you specify how many shares are going to be issued, you might have to go manually update a cap table, or you might have to manually update other agreements or other spreadsheets that you have to kind of maintain the state. That's how things are done today in a lot of ways, depending on, if you're talking private markets or public markets. But these are all very slow processes, and it's not up to the standard that most of us now expect most software type solutions to be at. It's very antiquated, it's very analog, right? So there's huge costs that come with that, right? Because then you have to interact with professional service advisors, lawyers, accountants that have to go through a very painful process of collecting the records, making sure they're legitimate, that they're the source of truth, that there's not future revisions that supersede it or that conflict with other records. So all those things take a lot of time, and it's very, very expensive. So by doing a very well thought through protocol that accounts for all of that, is all on chain, you remove a lot of doubt, you remove a lot of double handling, you remove a lot of cognitive load in the entire process. And therefore you can make it just a simpler experience that's less risky and ultimately much, much cheaper and much, much faster.
Is that, Stefan, is that kind of what you've experienced working with clients, with your prior company?
So I did not actually work directly with any clients. I was deep in the bowels of the engineering team. But of course, I did have regular interactions with the product team because I'm in product engineering. And as such, I do have an understanding of what customers generally need. When you say companies, though, it wasn't clear to me who you were talking about when you said companies. It also wasn't quite clear to me who James was referring to, because my experience with specifically capital markets in this case, right, or the investment banking scene in general, is that you would have your primary issuer, the company, for example, who is trying to issue or who issues a security, whether it's an equity or a bond, is the company that issues it. Then there are the investment banks in the middle. There are the accounting firms. I think James mentioned some of them. There are the accounting firms who are involved in in auditing things and making sure that all the T's and I's are dotted. And then there are the investors. And I guess that for depending on who you are talking about in this deal flow, they all have different needs and requirements. I guess what I observed was that the people who issue everybody wants to get a better deal, right? So an investor would want to participate in deals because they get better access to get better rates, right? They could potentially get a better rate of return. They get access to the private market that they normally otherwise wouldn't. Generally speaking, the issuer, depending on how the implementation of the blockchain-based solution works, the issuer then gets a lower fee, because you can actually, in this entire end-to-end process of doing an issuance for whether it's a bond or a security or a structured product, whatever it is that you're issuing, right? In the entire deal flow, if you can disintermediate a bunch of folks and essentially have one primary company that you work with as your bank, right? Then your fees go down. So the person who issues gets lower fees. And if they get the assurance that, it's auditable, it's on the blockchain, etc., then of course there is that for them. Then of course there's the investor who now has access to perhaps deal flow where their participation can be spread across many more deals, because their individual participation can be smaller because it's tokenized.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I know that your prior company kind of used, in terms of the technical design choice, they use permissioned like a fork of a public chain code based into a permission DLT solution for that. And obviously, like for us and James, we're advocating for doing so on BSV public blockchain. So maybe you guys can tell us a bit about the considerations in this dynamic.
Okay, maybe before James go, maybe I'll throw James a little bit of a tough one, and I'll ask him. I'll throw this out there, right? Which is the first question that needs to be asked is why the blockchain in the first place, and what value does it bring to the participants in the ecosystem, even before we get to private or public. My experience has been that the primary challenges tend to be regulatory. The risk is borne by the company. In terms of regulatory risk, is borne by the company, and from the company standpoint, perhaps whether or not they're implementing their solution on a blockchain or not in the back end doesn't really matter, because it does not necessarily de-risk anything for them. So unless they can find a way to provide value to their customers, then by doing it on the blockchain, right? Maybe they shouldn't. But I really want to hear James's take on this.
Sure. So I think so my thesis or hypothesis as a company is that just putting public securities like shares on the blockchain is not that valuable. It doesn't add that much. It does strip out some costs. It does improve the IT systems in terms of having different databases and basically resolving discrepancies in terms of accounting and things like that. So I think there is improvements there. I think that a BSV type blockchain, a blockchain that's actually very performant and can scale, has unique properties in that it can be a very effective clearing and settlement network. So we consider like DVP, like delivery versus payment in traditional networks, and the clearing networks they have there. You can, as a class, remove that entire sort of structure from the economy. You don't need clearing and settlement networks anymore. You can do it all on chain. And there's huge economies of scale that come from that. So if you go and look at all the different clearing networks out there, the payment networks, all those different types of systems that service various different countries around the world, there's many of them, like 50 plus, right? If it depends on how you want to classify it. So you can just remove all of that and all the labor that goes into supporting those systems, all the antiquated various different software solutions that are non-integrated and have to be translated and interpreted. So that just systemically is an improvement if you can get them all on the public blockchain. So one single network that does it all, we think that's a big value prop just in and of itself. But we think that the bigger value prop is kind of some of the things that I was alluding to. And I can tell that there's a little bit of a, I didn't communicate it necessarily effectively, but the smart contract, if you can do a real smart contract in which all of the terms and conditions are on chain and you start to codify it and start to deliver on the promises of smart contracts, you can deliver a significantly improved experience across the entire life cycle of the contract that strips out big costs. And more importantly, speeds things up, makes it easier to understand, needs less advisement, reduces risk. And again, this all those components drive back to better, faster, cheaper is how I view it. So I actually think that just the token part of it is like 5%, you know, of the whole equation. The smart contract is where the real value proposition is.
Do you see a kind of regulatory compliance or just the conversation with various regulatory bodies in different jurisdictions would be one of the major challenges to see, you know, a full-fledged development in the space?
I think that the biggest regulatory hurdle that I hope that we can overcome at the moment is in places like Singapore, for example, where we don't yet have retail participation in the capital markets. So the retail investor is not allowed to participate in capital markets. They're considered a risky vehicle, and you need to qualify as somebody called or labeled an accredited investor. That means that you're essentially an individual who has either about $220,000 per annum income, or you have about $700,000 in liquid assets in order to qualify for this, right? This necessarily means that the regular retail investor, the people who rushed into the ICO craze, for example, right? Those folks would not be allowed to participate. And in fact, most people who buy stocks with an e-broker would also not be allowed to participate in these rounds. I'm hoping that the regulatory landscape changes so that mom and pop stores can start becoming issuers of securities, but also that retail investors can start participating in really small deal flows. A mom and pop issuer wants to issue a bond for 100,000 because they want to raise capital for expansion. They're in my neighborhood. I want to support them. I want to participate in that issuance, right? But this needs regulatory changes, and I'm hoping that over time the regulatory landscape changes sufficiently to allow for this to happen.
James, do you have anything to add on top of that?
So I would say that it's mostly an education problem at this point. So I think everything can be satisfied on a proof of work public blockchain solution like Bitcoin SV. I think all the controls can be put in place. I think the outcomes for regulators in terms of accountability, in terms of compliance, in terms of monitoring sort of the compliance and holding sort of firms to account, whatever their role is in this ecosystem, is significantly better. It's a simpler system for them to monitor when the tooling is right. It removes a lot of doubt. The time stamping component is important. There's less wiggle room for, you know, manipulation and things like that there. So I think it's just an education component. I don't necessarily agree with, you know, this being a retail explosion of utility for retail consumers as investors necessarily, or even more particularly small mom and pop shops as issuers. I think there will be to a degree. And that's sort of some of the things I was saying before, that if you get a great software solution that builds upon these protocols that are smart contracts, you can de-risk it from a technical point of view, and you can build a better user experience that kind of protects these retail investors from some egregious stuff. They can alert them to contracts that are perhaps not favorable to them or exploitive, things like that. So these types of components can sort of make it a lot easier. And it also makes sort of the governance components and the general like administrative things that go into investing easier. So you can get reminders to go do it, and you can do it from your phone. You don't have to open a huge PDF document that's non-standardized and different across every investment with different relationships all through email and keep track of all those documents, which becomes just a huge administrative burden to the point where your unsophisticated investor is just not able to handle that type of work if they're doing many investments, right? And I think software can make it so they can actually do that. Whether it's the right approach for them as like a sort of an investment strategy that yet remains to be seen. It's a question that is still open, but I have my opinions on it.
Great, yeah, that's a super interesting discussion. Thanks, James and Stefan.
Likewise,
I think we're still like in the early phase, but yeah, very interested in looking at what's going to happen next in this space. Thanks, guys.
Likewise. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
All right. Let's bring on Fu Qiang. Fu Qiang is the co-founder of TokenSwap, which is the first, I believe, automated market maker or AMM style DEX that's been built on BSV. Hey, Fu Qiang.
Hi, Ella.
Hi, how's it going?
Pretty good. How about you?
Good. Looks like you're still in the office.
Yes, I am. Because of the Max in the office.
Yeah, so I'm personally very excited about the TokenSwap projects. I think like the overall community has seen a lot of the DeFi growth in other blockchain ecosystem and has been asking about when are we gonna have similar products in BSV. So why don't you show us what is TokenSwap?
Sure. So I'll do a short presentation.
Cool.
So, the TokenSwap works very similar to other AMM swaps, Ethereum, Binance Chain, etc. So first, you have to connect to a wallet. Right now, Volt is the only wallet that supports TokenSwap. Can you see the pop-up? After clicking this,
I can't see
connect
the
the wallet because it's outside of the shared screen.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a small pop-up of the wallet.
Yeah. Okay. There's a QR code. Users have to scan with Volt wallet to connect to TokenSwap. It's very similar to connecting MetaMask to Uniswap, etc. So after a few seconds, you see now the address is connected to TokenSwap. You see this address?
Yep.
Right now, users can choose to swap tokens or provide liquidity. For example, if I swap 0.1 BSV for Metacoin, again, there's a pop-up to make the payment.
To confirm the payment on your wallet.
Yes. The whole process is very similar. The transaction is complete. Now, you have paid, I have paid 0.1 BSV and received 2,959 Metacoin. It's done. So my balance have updated. Next, I'll show how to provide liquidity to TokenSwap. Again, 0.1 BSV. The Metacoin, the other token is matched. It appears automatically. There will be another pop-up to confirm the transaction. It's a bit slow because there are many transactions being generated at once. It's a very complicated contract transaction.
What's the benefits for liquidity providers to the pool?
Liquidity providers are a big chunk of the transaction fee. The transaction fee goes directly to the pool, and when liquidity providers remove their liquidity, they will remove the fee revenue at the same time.
What's the basis points charged for the fee, and how much of that goes to the LP?
It's 0.25%, 0.25% transaction fees. 0.2% is sent back to the pool. 0.05% is kept by token swap. This feature is still in test, is still under test, so there might be some problem. But I think I have already demonstrated how the product works.
Yep.
Users can disconnect the wallet and connect it again.
Sounds good.
So,
yeah,
that's basically all the features right now.
Great. I know it's really hard to build a AMM style DEX on BSV with the existing tools that we have. So yeah, it's very impressive, I'd say.
Yes.
So maybe we can get into some of the questions that I prepared. And for the audience out there, if you have any questions on token swap, feel free to type it in the Q&A form in Zoom. So first, tell us, about your experience building, token swap and AMM on BSV. Like, what are the pros and cons for building it on BSV versus other blockchains?
I think the pros, of course, obviously, is much lower fees, higher TPS, and zero confirmation, which means we don't have to face problems that Ethereum developers have to face. Like, people have to pay $10 or even hundreds of dollars for a transaction. There's no such thing on token swap. A typical token swap transaction costs like 20 cents or something per transaction. That's like 10 times, at least 10 times less expensive on than Ethereum transactions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like, high fee definitely hinders, regular retail people to enter the whole DeFi space in Ethereum.
Yes. The concept being, I think the concept being the difficulty of building stuff on BSV, because there are so many infrastructure stuff have to be built from scratch. We actually have been doing research from 1 year ago to how to build a swap product on BSV. We have been talked with Ascript team, Xiaohui, from last year. A few days ago, he shared a message with me. It was our chats from last year, from April last year. And I was asking him, when are we going to be able to build stuff like swap and like the Lightning protocol on BSV? That time, we didn't expect to be that we will be able to deliver in such a quick manner. But finally, it's online now.
Yeah, it's super exciting. So what's gonna be on the roadmap for token swap? Like, I know currently you guys, it's still in the testing phase, and there's one pool in there. What are some of the new features or like new pools that you guys are planning to launch down the road?
Right now, we're developing a feature to allow users to, it's called liquidity mining. Users can provide liquidity to token swap and the platform token, a swap token. Just for example, token swap will push out the platform token to incentivize users to provide liquidity. And also, Vote is building an asset bridge to bring stablecoins to BSV. After that, there will be stablecoin pairs like USDC BSV pair on token swap. Yes, and also
that's super exciting. And speaking of stablecoin, I know some projects are also considering issuing stablecoins natively on BSV. So that could be some areas to collaborate as well.
Yes, I think the major obstacle is the token protocol. Actually, before Sensible contract, we have been doing research on almost every token protocol on BSV, but none of them actually satisfies our demand, our need to build stuff like token swap and Lightning protocols. And another thing we're planning to build is a Lightning protocol. I think we're confident that the product will be online within next 6 months at max.
So
by end of this year.
Does that mean that you guys are building out a Oracle as well yourself, or you're leveraging some of the existing oracles out there and integrate with them?
No, existing oracles mainly it's Chainlink and other stuff on Ethereum. They have no BSV data, so we're not able to use them. There are other developers inside China community building an oracle system. It's called Witness on Chain. Yeah, I think it'll be enough for us to deliver the Lightning protocol.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, you know, automated market maker as well as borrow lending are kind of the two fundamental financial primitives.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of interesting products can be built based on these two building blocks. Yes.
Yes. Actually, if we look at the data, DEX and Lightning protocol maybe take like over 80% of all total value locked on DeFi, among all DeFi protocols and products. So if you're able to deliver the Lightning protocol and combined with the token swap, maybe we can lock up like hundreds of thousands of BSV inside contract protocols, which means we will be able to drive a huge amount of BSV from centralized exchanges to token protocols, Lightning protocols and DEX protocols. There's a hope that this will drive price of BSV up in a big way.
I won't comment on the price, but I do know that a lot of community members in the BSV ecosystem are, you know, seeking different yield opportunities with BSV, right? And the existing, some of the products out there don't really have that support. So I think there's a pretty big market that's not, it's untapped to create additional yield for BSV.
Yes, yield will be available on token swap and the Lightning protocol we're building.
So I can
share a little bit about the Lightning protocol, the design.
Oh, that would be great.
Let me change the share screen. So this is the Lightning protocol. Like people will be able to, on the market, people will be able to like deposit and provide liquidity to supply tokens on the Lightning protocol to earn an interest. And users will also be able to borrow BSV and stablecoin stuff and manage their portfolio, their Lightning and borrow portfolios here.
Got it. So do you have an expected timeline in terms of when the lending protocol is going to roll out?
Hopefully by end of this year. It will spend like 3 or 4 months like to fully build the product during next few months. Next month, we're building a feature to allow users to provide liquidity to token swap and earn yield. And after that, we'll spend most of the time delivering Lightning protocol.
Yeah, that's great. So looking at there, we got a question from the audience to you. Do you think the transaction fee of token swap will remain as low, this low over time, and how you are able to keep the transaction fee low?
The transaction fee on BSV is not going to be like on Ethereum. It's not going to shut up a lot several times during market hype, because BSV itself is scalable. If you like today, people are like maybe generating 100,000 transactions. Tomorrow, maybe it's 1 million transactions. The fee is not going to like going up several times. Miners can handle that transaction spike easily.
And I saw on your website, you mentioned no front running on token swap, which I thought was pretty interesting because it has been a topic that's been discussing the Ethereum ecosystem quite a lot. Can you maybe elaborate on more on that?
There's no such thing. There is no front running on token swap because that is because how transaction orders are determined. On BSV, miners have no miners have no power to change transaction orders. Once you throw your transaction into mempool, it's determined. Miners have to mine the transaction in that order. The order is done. But on Ethereum, miner has the power to reorder transactions. They have the power to like determine which transaction to be mined first. Yeah, that's the simple reason.
Got it. Yeah, and now there's a whole areas of study ways to bribe the miners.
It's funny
because of the Ethereum DeFi. Yeah. Great. Yeah, very interested in be using token swap and see what's come next. How can people learn more about token swap? What's your maybe show about your social media?
Yes, it's here, Twitter and Telegram. Also, they can like read our documentation. We're updating the docs bit by bit, gradually.
So for developers out there who want to build tools or different features to interact with token swap, are they able to do that now, or maybe like at a later stage?
Later stage will open up more like APIs, etc., for other developers to build stuff on top of token swap. But right now, they can. Our GitHub is also open. We're fully open source. Yeah. After we deliver the next feature of letting users to provide liquidity and earn yield, we will spend some time to provide better APIs for other developers to build on top of token swap.
Someone is asking why lock up BSV?
Why lock up BSV, right?
Yeah, give a pitch.
for that is only for liquidity providers, because if you don't lock up BSV into the pool, how other traders trade? This can be called a peer-to-contract model. If you compare that to order book exchanges, in order book exchanges, the platform like Huobi or OKCoin or Coinbase, etc., they match traders, right? But in token swap, the contract matches. Contract first have to pull BSV together, and then if any users can swap with the contract. Yeah.
So
or there's no pool. Users have to swap with someone, right? That someone is the contract, is the token swap liquidity pool. That's why we have to, liquidity providers have to lock up their BSV into the pool, so other users can swap with the locked up funds.
Right. I think another way to kind of explain this dynamic is in the traditional financial market, you have professional firms coming in as the market maker. And they have proprietary information, and they've done providing liquidity to both sides. And the automated market maker is a way to use smart contract capability to allow anyone like us, or whether it's just individuals or companies who have balance sheet, to directly participate and fill that role as market maker. So and by doing that, you get some yield in the form of a fraction of the trading fees, and then in your case, addition to that, you also have planned to provide other like token yield opportunities, I guess.
Yes, you explained much better.
All right, yeah, that's super interesting. When are you guys going to launch the public version so people can start to use?
Actually, it's already public version, but the vote wallet just completed connecting a few days ago, so the experience is not so good. It's very slow. Sometimes it fails, but everything will get much better in the next upcoming weeks as we fix more bugs and the product becomes more stable and the experience becomes better.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much, Qiang, for demoing the token swap as well as giving us a sneak peek of the borrow lending protocol. So
Yeah.
We'll definitely keep an eye on your social media and see updates of the product.
Yes.
Thank you. So with that,
Pleasure.
this concludes this APAC meetup. I hope everyone had a good time, and please go ahead and try some of the products that we talked about today, and look forward to the next one.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.